Good afternoon, everyone. Great to be with you on as Tony said, a beautiful sunny Friday afternoon. I will be providing some information that was provided at the conference that was just held a couple weeks ago for all of the federal district level staff, and our staff were involved with that as well. I am just focusing on two parts of our ESSA consolidated plan today. Just for your information, you can see all of the plan at OSPI's website, and there is a citation at the end of this PowerPoint. As I go through, I invite you to ask questions, to type them in, and periodically I will stop just for a minute to see if there are any questions that have been posed to me. And as we end today, if you have other questions, don't hesitate to email me those questions at any time. So let's get started. We have about an hour together, and the section that we're going to be talking about today are the accountability section and also the school improvement parts of Washington's proposed Every Student Succeeds Act consolidated plan. And as many of you know, this act was signed into law on December 10th, 2015. This is just a reminder that this was probably one of the happiest days for a lot of us because it made some significant changes to the requirements under NCLB, and those went away, and now we have a new law in which we will be working together in a much more coordinated, consistent way to help support our schools, our teachers, and our students. The first section of this PowerPoint has to do with what are the shifts that we've made from NCLB to the Every Student Succeeds Act. And probably one of the most important pieces of this is that as we look at the Every Student Succeeds Act, there's a much higher emphasis on equity of access to programs, equity of services to children. And so I want to start from that point of view as you look at the Every Student Succeeds Act list. There's an emphasis on growth and how our young people are doing from year to year. We have looked at growth over the years through our student growth percentiles. Our accountability assessment team has been looking at how we include growth, and I'll talk more about that later in our accountability plan. We've always looked at the issues that we have, which are not just Washington's issues, but other states as well, with the opportunity, and if you are, you may call it the achievement gaps for our children that come from different races, that come from special education, that are EL students, come from living in poverty. We have a new way to look at how we identify and support our schools, our lowest achieving 5% schools. So we have one more year of supporting priority and focus schools under the old system. And for the 17-18 school year, we will finalize the support for those priority and focus schools. In 18-19, we will be identifying our new comprehensive and or targeted schools. So similar definitions of those, but the supports that will be put in place will be very different, and I'll go into those again in a little more detail later. We have effective educators. This replaces highly qualified, and again, I'll give you the definition of effective that the educators work group, the ESSA educators work group, pulled together. We've looked and are continuing to look at the flexibility under ESSA for how we can braid or blend, those are the two words that are most commonly used, our federal and state programs to really help support districts in meeting their goals for your students and your schools, and your teachers and your administrators. There are still requirements for us to look at improvement models for our lowest 5% of our schools. And that will be, again, there's some major changes in here where the districts have a much more comprehensive accountability set to them and how they support those targeted and comprehensive schools. We'll go into that as well a little bit more in a bit. And as we look at the supports that we have to pull into our districts from our districts to our schools. That's what that bottom one is talking about. So those two bottom areas go together. So as we look at just some of the different definitions and information that's come out for accountability, this just talks about a summary of the regulations. What the key point of this slide is that ESSA has gone away from the punitive measures of NCLB. And if you don't take anything else from this slide, that's what ESSA is all about. We don't have the hammer. We don't have the accountability requirements of public school choice or supplemental education services under ESSA that were there under NCLB. There's another piece to this that I have really appreciated as we've been working with our work groups and looking at what goes into our plan, and that is that we can really use our imaginations, our best research data. You can put the whole list together. What do we know about what really works for schools is what this is all about, and how do we implement that into our plan? As we look at the summary of regulations, there are some new statutory language pieces, and it deals with the accountability system. And under this area, now we have to look at multiple measures of school success. Again, this is different than we've had in the past under the law. Our state has done this for many, many years, so it's not new to Washington State. But there are some new allowances, is the word I would use, that we have under ESSA that we did not have under NCLB. So we have to still look at academic outcomes. So that's our state proficiency test. There's SBAC. We still have to look at student progress. So this, we have a much clearer definition as we look at how are our kids growing in their knowledge base. What are they doing to meet the standards and expectations that the school, the teachers have for those young people. And a new piece is looking at school quality. And again, I will go into that in just a minute in a little more detail. The key part of this law that is a huge shift from NCLB is that we are really looking at a well-rounded education. And as you look at the components of the law, you might want to take a look at the new section of Title IV Part A, which really gets to the intent of the changes throughout ESSA. And that is that there is this focus still on the testing for English language arts, math, and science. But the law continuously says over and over again that we will be paying attention, we have to pay attention to all those content areas that keep our kids engaged in school and meet the needs of each individual student. So this is a huge shift for all of us from NCLB. If you were to go back to 1992 in our state law, this would be exactly what our state law said, that we would look at English language arts, reading and writing, as speaking and listening is with what is in that law. We'd look at mathematics, we'd look at science, and we would pay attention to the arts, to health and fitness, to civics, social studies, and the list goes on. So this, again, is a key change from NCLB. We also have flexibility for districts as they start supporting their lowest achieving schools and looking at different types of solutions, things that they design, that they put into place to support those schools. And that is, again, a difference because in the past you had to follow the 4 major turnaround principles for school districts, and they were required. They still are part of the solution that districts may select, but districts may also select other supports for their schools that are their most in need, struggling schools. Again, parents, families are really important to all the work that we do. And there is a clear expectation as we work through any of our title programs, Title I through Title IX, as we work with supporting our lowest achieving schools, that parents and families and other stakeholders, as well as educators, are actively engaged in implementing ESSA or implementing school and district improvement plans. The last part to the regulations is that what I mentioned when I first started. There is a strong emphasis on civil rights, and that we must ensure that every one of our children have the right to an appropriate education, that they have access to the courses that will help them succeed in school, and that they have the supports, and that districts and schools have the resources that are needed to support those young people. So as we go through our accountability systems section, we're looking at implementation of some of the requirements, the accountability requirements in 2018-19. I know we've had a lot of questions around, well, since OSPI has determined that our new state superintendent has determined that we are not going to submit our ESSA consolidated plan until September, what does that mean for us as a district? So the section that really is addressed, or that we will be addressing and implementing a year after the 17-18 requirements for implementing ESSA, is the accountability section. So that is what this slide is talking about, is that in 2018-19 will be the first year that we will identify our lowest achieving schools, which will now be called comprehensive or targeted schools. And again, as I said earlier, this is pretty much what we have determined in the past as priority and focus, but there are a couple of twists that we'll get into in just a minute. OSPI has worked with work groups the last few months, and we have looked at the accountability system goals, and we have set ambitious goals and measures of progress for academic outcomes, and we will be also working in more detail over the next few months to more clearly define those goals, and that work will be done by an accountability and academic achievement team. As we go through that work, we are going to bring in technical assistance team to help us look at all the data, facts that we need to pay attention to. So there will be much more detail in that section of the plan as we go through the next few months. We'll be looking at proficiency and grad rate gaps, as what this slide is actually talking about as well, and closing those gaps. This one just says we have to follow the rules, just like you have to follow the rules with us when we're working with you. We will be looking at a multi-indicator statewide accountability system, and it has to be for all of our public schools, not just Title I schools. We have to have a single statewide accountability system. And we have indicators that will really help us look in much more depth at our students and their academic, social, emotional needs as we go through the work and the identification process that we put into place. What we have to look at, what those indicators include, are the kind of the boundaries around those indicators, is that they have to be the same for all public schools. They have to be valid, reliable, and comparable measures. And we have to disaggregate by all of the same subgroups that we had to disaggregate by in the past. So the racial, ethnic groups, English learners, students with disabilities, low socioeconomic students. And so we still have to provide that information on our report card for all of those different groups. Here's what we have to measure, though, now. We have to look at their academic achievement, the students and schools. We have to look at the grad rate from high schools. And what we are going to be looking at is the growth rate for students in elementary and middle schools. We have to include English language proficiency. In the past, that was in a different section of the law, and now it's embedded into the Title I assessment accountability section of the law, so that we're looking at all of the data elements together. And we have to select at least one state-selected indicator of school quality or student success. And the qualifier here is that we can select these different ones for different grade spans. We need to ensure that that the state takes full flexibility that is allowed to us under ESSA as we look at the indicators, as we look at academic achievement of all of our children. We have to look at those young people that have not met proficiency. We have to look at those young people who have not met advanced levels of learning, and we need to really pay attention to those young people that are on the bubble. And what that means is they might, under our system, be right at going into a level 2 or a level 3 on the academic achievement test. And we're going to be looking at how they have grown and add that into our accountability system, which is a new component part. This statewide accountability system, the slide talks about we have to have a summative determination. So we've got different elements in the accountability measures, but what we have to end up with is one type of number or classification as to how the schools do. This one we are going to come back to in a few minutes because I have a graphic that I think will help clarify what I'm talking about here. For those schools that need comprehensive support, targeted support, we have to determine what that summative score is and identify those schools. And again, we have to report the school's overall results alongside performance for each indicator. So it's not just one summative score. We will report for each of the indicators for the accountability system that we put into place so that people can actually get a better view of what is going on within that school for their students that attend or for the teachers that are working with those young people, how their children are doing. We have to look at how we would weigh those different indicators. And again, I'm going to come back to a graphic that will show you the proposal that we have in our plan for this slide. We can choose our own academic progress and school quality or student success measures. We have had one team that has spent hours on one of our work groups on looking at those. I think we started with about 32 different indicators and narrowed it down to about 10, and then narrowed it down to 3 that we're going to start with, and a handful of others that we're going to look at as soon as data and reliability measures are calculated for those areas as well. This just tells you that some of the indicators that we might look at include grade point average, looking at advanced coursework for students, student growth or achievement. So since we have student growth for our 3 through 8th grade students, that is one of the indicators that we have selected. For high school, we have the opportunity to look at some other measures, which includes college enrollment, and that's one we are not sure that we will have consistent, reliable data for, so it is still one of those on the list. But what we are really looking at the high school is how many students are actively engaged in coursework that is an accelerated rate, so advanced placement or international baccalaureate, or if you are a student that's really interested in CTE, what kind of coursework are you taking to help you reach career and technical education standards. So I will come back to those again in a few minutes too with a graphic. This talks about our English language proficiency level and how we're going to determine where our young people are, and we had the right to take a look at adding in those students that had exited EL support systems, but the EL work group determined that they wanted us only to focus on those students that were actually in program at the time that we were making the determinations in our accountability system. This one is probably, I'm hesitating because this is the one that probably gives us all nightmares about. And This is the requirement. It has not changed. It is still within the law that 95% of all students who are in a grade that is tested must participate in the assessment. And so this is one that we will continue to work out what will happen if a school or district does not meet that participation rate. We had to do that this year because of a finding from the U.S. Department of Education for our agency. So many of you have probably lived through that with us this year. That will more than likely continue next year because the Department of Ed is really focused on that 95% of our young people will take the assessments if they are in the grade level grade levels that are assessed. So I'm not going to spend any more time on that one. We have to look at each subgroup separately, and I mentioned that earlier, so I don't think I need to go into that first bullet anymore in detail. But we're taking a look at the N size, and probably that our state is going to put in an N size of 20. We've had an N size of 30 in the past, but if you take a look at our accountability plan, we're talking about an N size of 20, and there are some caveats to that as well because we still have to make sure that students' identity is protected, so we'll be looking at an N size of 10 for that. But we have another proposal within the application because we were concerned that some of our student populations were not being fairly looked at as in our accountability system. So let me just give you an example, and you'll see this again in a minute. As we look at a population of students, what the accountability team determined was if there was a population of students within a school that had an N size less than 20, that they would take a three-year look. And as long as the number of students for each year was 5 or more and ended up being 20, that we would use 3 years of data to look at that specific subgroup. So that's just a component part of this section in which our accountability team looked at. Students with disabilities are still this requirement for those students with the most significantly cognitively disabled kids. I'll get it out in a second. Those young people, we still have a cap of 1% on testing those young people, but we also have some flexibility because if a district believes that they're going to have more than 1% of those students taking an assessment, they can apply to OSPI for a waiver of that rule. So here are the components of our plan, and you'll see that there are 6 of them there, and I am only going to be looking at 2 of them. And if you want to look at the rest of the plan, it is on our website, and you can certainly open that up and take a look. And you're also very welcome to ask me questions at any time. So I'm just going to take a second to see if anybody has posed a question yet. So you think about the questions you want to ask right now. And I don't see any, but I will give you just a couple more seconds if you want to ask something. Okay, seeing none, we will go forward. Maybe. There we go. So this is one of the sections of the plan where we're looking at academic achievement, the grad rate, and our English language proficiency. So I'll just go through the grad rate one right now because we have the opportunity, which we've had in the past, but we're taking even more advantage of this one, where we have to report the 4-year adjusted cohort rate for our determination if a school would be in the lowest percent of our, or lowest 5% of our schools. But we also have the opportunity to take a look at the grad rate for students that took 5 or 6 or 7 years to meet our graduation requirements. And this is, in particular, one of those elements that we have been concerned about for a long time, especially with some of our alternative learning routes for kids. And so we want to make sure that if a school does an excellent job of pulling kids back into the process, that they're recognized for that work. So to me, this is a big deal for us keeping kids in school, helping them graduate, even though it might take them another couple of years. So I'm going to go back to the elements of our accountability plan. And this one is an example of English language arts. And we have other examples, but today I'm just going to show you a few. The key component of this, I will direct everybody's eyes to the middle of that graphic. Because what we found is some people get hung up on the end point. And this is just our hope and dream. That 100% is not required like NCLB. It is our hope and dream for all of our students that they will meet English language arts standards by 2037. That's a hope and a dream, okay? But here's the reality of this graphic. When you look at the middle part of the graphic, you're going to see that from 2017 to 2026, 27, we're looking at cutting by 1/2 the learning gap. So that's 10 years to get us there. If you take a look at the lines, and it's probably hard to see on your screens, but as we look at the straightness of those lines, just remember those lines probably zigzag occasionally. This is just our best guess for right now. But if you look at some of the lines that are down at the 20, 25%, and you look at some of the lines that are up at the 80 or, well, 70 to 80%, there's huge learning gap issues here. And our goal is to ensure that each and every one of our students meet and exceed our state standards. So this graphic took us a long time to get to in the accountability work group, because what was really important to us is that we demonstrate that our schools are doing an excellent job of supporting every one of our children. And so this is the goal for 2027, that 1/2 of the learning gap will be cut after 10 years. Here's another example, and this is for high school English language arts. And our goal is that for 2026, for our 11th graders, that the minimum proficiency rate for all student groups will be 90%. Another for grad rate, same number, 90% or percentage. But as we look at this graphic, we're looking to see, again, that all of the groups of young people that are labeled below, be it racial or students with disabilities or limited English kids or low-income kids, that they're all going to hit the same point in 2026, 90%. And you'll see, too, on this one that it keeps going. And I think it even looks like it goes over 100%, at least on my picture right now. I'm not sure that can happen. So any questions about those? I'm going to just take a second to see if anybody has. Well, we have comprehensive and targeted schools for 17-18. So that goes back to the first part of the conversation. No, we will continue to have priority and focus schools during the 17-18 school year. We will have some information coming out to districts probably within the next couple of weeks from some guidance that we've received from the Department of Education, U.S. Department of Education, on the continuation of our priority and focus schools through next year. And we'd already had it set up that we would have support for those schools for 3 consistent years. So it's not a new look for our priority and focus schools. We do not have to have comprehensive and targeted schools until 2018-19. And I'm going to show you a graphic on that too in just a second. Any other questions to this point? Okay, not seeing any. We will go forward on the accountability support and improvement for schools section. Sorry, my computer is being a little touchy here. So when I was talking earlier about the academic indicators and our school quality or student success indicator, this is a graphic helping us all understand what we're talking about and taking a look at each of the grade spans and what would be required for each one of those. So as we look at the academic indicators for elementary, We're looking at proficiency, so that's the scores from the SBAC. We're looking at growth, and as I said before, student growth, we've taken percentiles we've looked at in the past. There may be some variances on this as we work with our technical assistance group on accountability over the next couple of months. So you might want to be aware and watch that work as it goes forward. We also will be using the English Learner Progress Measure, and so those are the three specific to academic indicators that will be used at elementary. The School Quality or Student Success Measure that was decided upon through our accountability team and through our prior superintendent, Randy Dorn, was chronic absenteeism. And that is one of the measures, if you take a look at other states' accountability systems that they've put into place, chronic absenteeism, which pops up in many of those states' plans as well. There's quite a bit of research done in this area. If kids aren't in school, then they're not going to learn. And so that's the reason, the basic reason why this one was selected for both elementary and middle school. Middle school has the same academic indicators as elementary. Where there's a difference is when you get down to high school. So we still look at proficiency, but now we look at grad rate. And nationally, in ESSA, it's at 67%. We exceed that in our state, so we're not having to worry about that one too much. So when I showed the graphic earlier about getting to 90%, we have a way to go, but we are doing relatively well compared to our sister states across the nation for getting our kids to graduation. The EL progress measure still is in place, but you can see that there are three different measures that we will be looking at for high school. So chronic absenteeism is one, so we can have consistency across all three grade spans. But we're also going to look at ninth graders on track to graduate. So what that really means is we're going to see, does the ninth grade student meet all of the requirements of the courses that they're taking or classes? And that means, did they not fail? Are they successful in their classes? And then the second one on there is advanced course taking, and I mentioned that earlier. So it could be things like advanced placement, international baccalaureate, running start, and it could be looking at technical skills, because we want to look at each child and the area in which they really believe that they excel as well. So that's the three for high school. Then going down to accountability, and sorry, I should have said, that's phase one. So what does phase one mean? That means for 18-19. Then as we go down our path and looking at these, we want to really, or the team wanted us to really pay attention to, there may be some indicators as we go through the next few years and look at the indicators that were selected, then to determine whether or not they really are accurate, provide us with reliable information. There may be some others that we want to pay attention to. So discipline is one of those areas that everybody's talking about right now, disproportionate discipline. We don't have all the data that we needed to make a final decision on whether or not we should include that one on that phase one section, so we're giving ourselves some more time to look at data on that. There was a concern or an interest in looking at teacher assignment and equity, and so this is one of the key indicators for our state under educator equity plan, is that we need to make sure that our teachers are the best possible teachers we can actually have with our students. And for those of you who work with Title I, you know it says that Title I students have traditionally been taught by non-highly qualified in the old language teachers in many of our schools, and that is not to happen anymore. So that's just my little aside for Title I there. But we have quite a teacher equity plan, educator equity plan, which is not just teachers, it's for principals as well. You may want to take a look at that section because it gives us a lot of information to think about and some really good solutions on how we can retain and recruit teachers and principals in the years to come. The last one on this is looking at school climate or engagement surveys. And this was really one of those areas in which many people were saying this would be something really good for us to take a look at. The validity of this measure is what we have questions about, and how do we make sure that across the state a measure could be used, and that it would be valid and reliable for us to collect data from. So those are the ones that we will be looking at over the next few years. And I'm sure as we learn about our accountability system, as we learn from you that are out implementing these, there may still be changes to this or additional areas. We have to weigh each one of those and make sure that our SQS, our school quality, student success, does not outweigh the other areas, because there is a real concern that proficiency and growth and grad rate and our progress of our EL students are key components, and so we wouldn't want any one of those to, the SQSS to outweigh those other areas. So what you're seeing here is just, we've said, the accountability team said, well, for elementary, middle, for proficiency, it would have a high or a medium weight. For growth, it would have a high rate. For EL progress, for elementary, a middle, medium to low, and middle, a low. And then for high school, for proficiency, it would be a medium to high range. But grad rate is really where it kicks in, so it would be weighted at a higher level. EL progress at a lower level, and SQSS across all three grade spans at a lower level. I'm going to check just a second to see if anyone has asked questions about that, because that's quite a bit of information coming at you very quickly. Okay, seeing none, we'll keep going. This just talks about the decision that was made by our accountability work group on how we identify comprehensive support for students and who we take a look at to identify those schools. So we're going to use the all student group, but in combination with targeted subgroups. So this is different than what we've done in the past, and again, I'm going to show you a graphic in just a minute that may help with how we're looking at targeted groups. But as we do the calculations for comprehensive groups, we're going to look at the data for all of our kids, and we're going to look at the data for our targeted subgroups, and then we'll put that information together and determine who are our lowest achieving 5% of our schools for comprehensive support. So let's take a look. Oh, just a second, I'll just do one more. Actually, I just talked about this one, about grad rate, and that we have the 4-year adjusted cohort grad rate, but we're also doing extended year. So I'm not going to go into more of that. And the participation rate I already talked about, so we're going to skip through that one. Sorry, I'm trying to get to another graphic that I think would be really helpful, so I'm going through these pretty quickly. Again, if you need this PowerPoint, it will be available to you. It's up on the website, I believe, right now. If not, I'll do a double check, and we will make sure it's there. And I talked about this, that for our English learners, it will be our current English learners that we are working through for the accountability. There's one little caveat with our ELs. If any of you are working in our Title III programs and working with EL students, we only have 1 year of EL Alpha 21 data, and I know that there were some challenges with that last year. And so this year will be our 2nd year of collecting that data, those data, and that will give us some information that we needed to make some further decisions on the accountability measure for our EL students. So that one, our AAW team will take a further look at and clarify in more detail as to what component parts of the accountability plan, what attributes we'll be looking at for EL kids. So here's one of the graphics that I wanted to get to. So on the left-hand side of the screen, this is what we have done in the past for our focus groups. So many of you, if you've had a focus school, you know that it usually was because of your English learner population, your students with disabilities. So in many cases, we didn't get to that next level of looking at support for our lowest achieving racial groups, and so it was focused on EL and students with disabilities and sometimes low-income students. So that was how we looked at the bottom 10% of our targeted subgroups under the old system. So that would have been the focus groups. So here on the right-hand side of the screen is what the accountability work group now has proposed, is that we look at the race ethnicity groups and we look at programs. And what we included under programs was English learners, students with disabilities, and poverty. And so we would look at the bottom 5% of both of those and do a rank order then of those to be included in that bottom 5%. And so this graphic is just really saying we're going to pay attention to race and ethnicity as well as the programs that students are participating in. This just talks about our comprehensive support and improvement. It's going to happen once every 3 years. So we will be on a 3-year cycle. The first year, as I said earlier, is 18-19. We have to identify our lowest 5% of schools. We also have to identify any high school that is below 67% with their grad rate. And that is the 4-year adjusted cohort grad rate. And we have to look at our schools, our Title I schools in particular, that have chronically low performing subgroups and that have not shown growth after a certain amount of time. And that amount of time is being decided upon by the AAW in the next, as I said, next few months. So we must provide support for our schools, and that's the bottom 5% of our schools. And there are Title I funds to do that, and those funds will be available to school districts to help support a school if it has been identified for comprehensive support or targeted support. And also, there's another component part to all of this, and that is looking at a school that has consistently underperforming subgroups over a certain amount of time. And so we're toying with 2 years, looking at 2 years and possibly 3. If there's a pattern where students have not done well in one of the subgroups and that pattern has continued, then those schools would be included within our system of support. As we look at setting goals and targets to identify our lowest performing schools, and this one talks about we're looking at performance over more than 2 years. We have to see how those schools demonstrate and look for supporting their lowest performing students. And they have to make significant progress in achieving the long-term goals that were set for the school in proficiency and grad rate goals. So this one is just really talking about flexibility that states have in setting those goals and defining consistently underperforming subgroups. So it's tied to what I was saying earlier as we work together and looking at those young people that may not have been supported in a manner in which they needed to be supported in the past. But again, remember, this is over a certain number of years that we would provide that data, and we would work with those schools and districts that might have one of those schools within their district. This one just, once again, emphasizes that it is really important. It is not just important, but it is required that whenever we are supporting our low-performing schools, that every one of the stakeholders is involved with the school, with the district, and determining what is going to happen for that school. They're going to look at why the school was identified, and they need to be included in the improvement process. So what this is saying is, as a school improvement plan is developed for a comprehensive or a targeted school, you have to include parents, and this is key, students, educators, principals, other school leaders in the development of those plans and in the improvement activities. And what the word that is not on here, but it was also important to understand, is that as you are implementing programs to support these schools, you have to look at the evaluation of the schools, and that evaluation needs to be part of that plan. And all these groups need to be involved in looking at that evaluation to determine what next steps need to occur if the evaluation is not good. So this one I spoke to just briefly earlier, and that is we have much more flexibility in allowing districts to look at evidence-based strategies that you can tailor to the needs of your students, that you would implement to help support those young people meet the state proficiency requirements in particular. We're lucky in our state because our Learning Assistance Program over the years has pulled together many of best practices which you could select from. If you're looking at overall overarching types of models to really make huge giant leaps of change within your district, those are also on a list on OSPI's website as to what you might consider. But again, what I can't underscore enough is there's much more flexibility at the district and the school level for identifying what those actions will be and what interventions you will put into place, because you know your students, and that's what this is about. This also talks about looking at the resource inequities that happen in some of our schools. And so this is when we talk about blending and braiding of funds. We're looking at how federal and state program funds can go together to help support those schools. And it's really looking at an in-depth evaluation of the expenditures that you are making per pupil. So how much Title I money is going to the school, how much basic ed dollars. I mean, that's pretty much set. But in addition to those basic ed dollars, what kind of LAP dollars or Learning Assistance Program dollars? Do you have Title III dollars going into the school? So it's looking at all of those resource revenue sources and how those are being used to support the students within the school. It's also what types of teachers do you have? Do you have effective teachers within the schools? If not, how can you change that? Do you have, especially in middle and high school, what kinds of advanced coursework do you have in place for the kids? Do you accelerate learning? It's not on this list, but it's one of those avenues that we could take a look at. And accelerate doesn't necessarily mean that you are going through very quickly the work. You're going through in a more deep understanding way of helping kids understand the content. And more to come on that one as we work through in the next couple of years. Do you have full-day K? In our state, we're pretty lucky because we have state-supported full-day K. A piece that is predominant throughout ESSA is how are you supporting your preschool students? Do you work with those preschool programs that are outside of the school to help them understand what are the requirements for birth to age 5 kids before they hit kindergarten? That's another component part of how some of the federal funds can be used. What supports do you use specialized instructional personnel, counselors and social workers, your library media teachers, your gifted and talented teachers? All of those are included within the law as to how you can support them with the funds that are available through ESSA. This slide just talks about the amount of money that could go to a comprehensive or targeted school. And this one kind of gave us all a pause when it said you have to do $50,000 or $500,000 because we know the limits of our set-aside for school support. So we'd be serving, well, I can't even venture to guess, but not very many schools compared to what we are serving right now. And so we have flexibility under the new accountability regulations that we don't have to set that amount at those levels, but that we can look to see and work with the district and the schools to determine what amount would be appropriate for them to have to help them make changes within their school systems. here is the timeline that I mentioned before and the one I was wanting to get to with you. As we look at implementation of ESSA, if you see the 15-16, 16-17, and 17-18, just want to make sure that you understand that that is the continuation of the old system of identifying priority and focus schools. So the 17-18 school year is the third year of support for those schools. And that is allowable under ESSA because we will not institute the accountability measures until the end of 18, not the end, sorry, the spring of 18, when we have our first round of implementation of ESSA. And we will identify comprehensive schools and targeted schools for the 18-19 school year, provide them with 3 years of support, and then we would not identify the next round until 21-22. So this graphic hopefully will help you understand our the system that we can go through in transitioning from the old NCLB priority and focus schools to our new ESSA targeted and comprehensive schools. Sorry, it's the wrong button there. There are new data reporting requirements for our report card. More to come on that. I just wanted to put this slide in here to remind you to take a look at the report card requirements that are there for districts as well. And again, those will go into effect next school year. Some of those we have to include a full set of the accountability information. So these are just some of the requirements. We have to look at our kids with the most significant cognitive disabilities who earn an alternate diploma, and we have to provide that information. We have to look at district and school level per pupil expenditures, and this is a big one. And we are actually asking for additional funding to help districts implement this. We'll see how that goes this ledge session, as well as funding for OSPI to help districts implement this requirement. We have to look at post-secondary enrollment data, and that has to be up on the report card as well. So this just gives you an idea of some of the new areas in which we have to do data reporting. And with that, I have covered the two specific areas of the accountability and looking at the school support. That was covered at our training, two-day training with school districts from across the state. And I'm going to look to see if we have any other questions. Okay, good. A couple. Define chronically low performing. That is part of what the AAW team is going to be doing. So I can't, Barbara, I can't give you a, oh, I shouldn't have said your name. No, I'm teasing. I won't be able to answer that right now because that will go into the details that were part of what we didn't get to in the first round, but will come through in our AAW work, our Achievement and Accountability Work Group recommendations that will go into the second part of our plan. Funding for targeted and comprehensive will be an additional Title I allocation or a part of our regular Title I. Good question. So out of Title I Part A, there's a section, 1003A, which we are required to take 7% off the top of our Title I allocation for the state. Those are the funds that will go to support targeted and comprehensive schools. However, as a district, you have the flexibility to use parts of your Title I Part A allocation to also support those schools if you so choose. So you've got two funds there, two funding streams. One is out of a state set-aside, and the other is you have the right, and it's not just Title I, there are other title programs that you can use to help support your lowest achieving schools as well. I don't see any other questions right now. So I appreciate you spending an afternoon, a Friday afternoon with me. I'm just sorry I can't see everyone. And I'm sending you my best wishes for a great weekend. And again, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to email me. And just for general information, this first round of public comment for our plan is going to end on February 15th, but we will have it up again later in the spring for a second round of public comment. I don't have the dates for that yet, but be watching for it probably May, and we'll let you know well before that goes out. So just doing one more check to make sure I didn't miss anybody's questions. No. Thanks again. Have a great weekend. Look forward to seeing you all in the future.